Imagine being a brand new player in the World of Warcraft. You choose your faction, your race, your class, and you hop into the game. Your character sails to Exile's Reach on a mission. You experience faction propaganda, you save a few comrades, you beat up an ogre, fight a dragon, and save the day. Then you're whisked off to your faction's capital city, just about ready to be taken on a ride to the Battle for Azeroth experience because, again, you're a brand new player. But before that, your faction leader acknowledges that you're new to the city and has you brought to a recently vacated home. Maybe the previous one was killed or something. But anyway, it's now yours, just like that, to build up, or decorate, or abandon. After a brief introduction, the quest thingamajigger pops up and it's time to go off to war. When you return home is entirely up to you. That's the sort of experience that I would want delivered for players in a World of Warcraft world with player housing. And you probably want to take a shot of water every time that I say that, I dare you. Player housing is many things. It's a distraction, it's a time sink, it's an opportunity to profit. But in my vision of it, it isn't a vehicle to obtain power or resources. It's not a mission table. It's not required. But according to Blizzard, player housing, like any other wanted feature in WoW, it has a time and a place on delivering on it, and it needs to make sense. So in today's really difficult to write vlog, I'm going to help it make sense. This time around, I'm going to be a bit more abstract with my ideas, if only to get you, the viewer, a little bit more excited, without getting turned off by the specifics. In an earlier video, I was naive, and I suggested that player housing could be introduced not in an expansion, but in a patch. Haha, let's get real though. Housing is more than just an expansion level of effort. It's likely that it's going to take even greater sacrifices to develop it and an arguably higher overhead for maintenance and continued development. But in exchange, I believe that after the raids and dungeons are cleared and the conquest points are earned, players will have more to fall back on and obsess over. In terms of successful additions to the World of Warcraft that aren't just expansion features, Mythic Plus is a great addition to WoW for progression and for competitive-minded players. But WoW needs a lasting endgame for collectors and role players that are beyond just transmog and pets. The past few expansions, including Shadowlands, have done very little in service of that. Think of the creativity in part of players if Blizzard gave us the tools. Now, some of us could have a very humble homestead, a getaway after all the titan slaying and death dealing that our characters face every day. Maybe we'll make a shrine towards our greatness, rooms lined with our many transmog collections and weapons and severed heads. Maybe we'll make a makeshift bar for visitors and roleplayers to flock to. Maybe you'll make the next Goldshire. Yeah, what I'm about to suggest may horrify you, or maybe you'll like this, but if it's really that resource heavy to develop and launch traditional player housing, the expansion that introduces it is likely going to have to make sacrifices. Specifically, we could have an expansion without the kind of progression past max level that we've seen in Legion, Battle for Azeroth, and Shadowlands. Yeah, it sounds controversial. But you know what else sounds controversial? Letting go of each of these borrowed powers, like artifacts and azerites and covenants, systems that also took years to design, engineer, develop, balance, retune, and then leave behind. All that effort just to last a few short years. But housing, like pets and transmog collections, will continue to grow without any worry about button bloat and power creep and bitchin' about borrowed powers. So if not progression past max level, what are players going to get in this sort of expansion? Now, it's not to say that a talent row for 36 specializations is easy to add, but if players just got another talent row in the next expansion along with a solid endgame crafting system and PvE and PvP currencies, we can sell the next expansion with player housing as an alt-friendly, low-maintenance return to, quote, WoW's roots. Put in a solid narrative with good story beats and you have yourselves a hit. And then resources could be invested into housing and long-term support. It'd be a mix of simpler times with a new, shiny, evergreen feature. It's not unlike Mist of Pandaria, introducing pet battles and collections of pets while killing off what was left of the talent system. Many still look back on that expansion fondly, and pet collection thrives today. Player housing is, of course, an absolutely gargantuan project by comparison, but I think it can work here if we pool a very, very precious resource: faith. Unjoking, unwavering, straight-faced faith. I'm gonna get really bad comments for that, aren't I? Yeah, okay. I've talked this up in past videos, but it wouldn't be right if I didn't brush up on how my vision of player housing would work, so let's get started. Many of these concepts borrow a bit from existing features. Players are already accustomed to NPCs that craft items for you, like Pascal in Mechagon. So you'll have this housing NPC that does the actual crafting. And for you, you're going to offer up whatever items it asks for in this UI, and it spits out decorations for your home. And by the way, anything that you have made would be a one-time, account-wide unlock, just like the other collection systems in WoW. It'll have recipes to unlock, again, which are account-wide, that come from all over the world. Every expansion, sure, just farm for it, right-click and use it to add to your recipe list. But of course, you need to get all the materials together too. Similar to crafting legendaries in the upcoming Shadowlands expansion, crafting professions will be heavily involved in your housing needs. So if you couldn't care less for customizing a house yourself, you're like, screw it? Dude, you can sure make money off people who do. Crafting professions will provide, a specialized cloth and metals and parts and components and etceteras. Professions are also already separated into each expansion to make crafting these accessible. And sort of like Shadowlands, recipes can be found from old raid or dungeon content to encourage a little bit of prestige, at least for a while. As for customizing the house itself, there's also the garrison building UI, which, at least in concept, can be adapted to the UI of customizing your home. So let's take a look. Really, take a look, like stare at it for a bit and imagine with me. You can use buttons and tabs on the side somewhere to switch from room to room, and the internal map changes to reflect the blueprint. Then, just click on a section and customize. Use the side menus to select decorations you've unlocked and hit apply. You can also use this UI to maybe build extensions, change the tile set of the house, and more. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that you're given a home at your capital city at an early level, and maybe, for the sake of launching player housing, the scope of what's possible with your home is going to be pretty limited. But later on, we can maybe enjoy locations elsewhere, like the outskirts of Ashenvale, the plains of the Barrens, the streets of Suramar City, Ironforge, maybe Gilneas? Yeah, sure, why not? A common ask that I see is to have a sort of neighborhood where you can see other people's houses. So let's talk briefly about some of the possibilities and challenges. Final Fantasy XIV is a very popular MMO with a housing system that allows multiple houses or plots to be displayed in an instance. What's unique is that these plots are finite. In fact, there's an entire economy revolved around the scarcity of plots and buying them up before that other person. And you need to maintain your home, otherwise it gets removed from the neighborhood, if I remember this correctly. On top of that, you can also see the house and walk into the yard, but the interior will have an instance. It has a load screen and everything. If the World of Warcraft had its own sort of neighborhood system, how would that work? Personally, I'm not in the favor of the idea of land scarcity. I'd probably nix the whole idea of that, of having the game manage neighborhoods, and instead give players the ability to make their own neighborhoods, to invite others. So let's imagine, right? Let's imagine that I, Soul, started my own neighborhood, and I invited people to join it as if it was a guild, just with houses. Maybe the people in some neighborhoods can instead collaborate to make an entire set environment for RP shenanigans, or a collection of buildings that make up your guild base, guild hall, or something like that. The point is you would have a bunch of houses on your space and you'd kind of be in charge. Or you could have a group of people run it like a homeowners association with stupid rules and dues and politics. Goodness, I can really see the World of Warcraft HOA drama, right? Anyway, what would be the challenges to a WoW neighborhood? Technical stuff that flies over my head, mostly, I'm sure. WoW likes to avoid instancing whenever it can, so if they were to try to make it so that you can just wander into anyone's home in the neighborhood with no load time, how many homes can you fit without causing some sort of server problem? Whatever that number is, that number would probably be much higher if the interior of that home was instanced like Final Fantasy is. But that's just one of thousands of things to consider when setting up something like a neighborhood of player-created homes. Now, we've veered way off of the main subject. You see how I get lost and excited about this whole player housing stuff? But anyway, we're talking about tearing away the excuses that Blizzard has given to not have player housing. Now, I'm already stepping way over the line, asserting that borrowed powers can be tossed aside in favor of an evergreen system, but that's the most ideal scenario that allows player housing to make sense, because you're shoving that much work out of the way. We've had a bunch of expansions without a temporary expansion feature. We've had a handful of expansions with them. I say step back just a little bit to reassess. Another commonly cited argument is that the cities are going to be empty, Blizzard has said. I think they even said that after Warlords of Draenor when they went through with that anyway, and most of us were talking from our garrisons while I would hear war spears being overrun. Again. We live in a World of Warcraft of connected realms, and sharding, and capitals and faction hubs with a shared chat, and a menu-based system of queuing for instance content. I think by this point, that reasoning, empty cities, that just doesn't work anymore. But arguably the greater obstacle to overcome comes from the player sentiment. I'm not going to be the least bit surprised if the comments below that are disparaging this are just a repeat of the same thing. Blizzard had their chance with garrisons. Everyone's going to do it, and cities are going to be empty. No one's going to do it. It's a waste of developer time. The truth is there are so many ways to make this work. Plenty of ideas that are as good, if not way better than anything I've talked about. Reasoning and technical knowledge that can address these issues. And that there isn't much of an excuse to not give this a shot. I'd go as far as to say that on top of player housing, shoot, let there be wacky decorations in the in-game shop, right? Or do cross promotions with Hearthstone and Overwatch and Diablo and StarCraft and all the other games that I missed. And as a commentator, I've seen the fatigue from fans and critics alike who are tired of systems that we put hundreds of hours into only for it to fade away. Our efforts at gearing up are one thing, but the time put into staying ahead on artifact power or farming up that corruption, that's not gonna be worth shit in the next expansion. But you know what? That house that you were given at level 10, it's still there waiting for you, if you want it.